Okay, there's a few things I've got to get off my chest. Mainly, I know narcissism is really common these days, especially in, you know, certain people, even my family, and my dad and my grandmother, they're grandiose narcissists because they seek social status. They were both on the city council, which is seeking social status. They are self-centered. They expect everyone to just bend to their needs and don't. They only show, either in my dad's case, no empathy towards anyone because he can't show empathy because he doesn't understand anything because he doesn't even try, or selective empathy like my grandma does and just chooses who she wants to uh, listen to and talk about person to person, which people are the least reliable source of information. You would think she should know that, uh, but anyways, all these years I've had not a single person show me support except for my mother in 2001. Joseph knows all about that. I've already mentioned that before, but um, I didn't even know he lived in Russellville for 20 years until he looks me up needing help getting a job at those apartments. And there's no doubting the fact that me and probably a few other people helped him get that job. Now, what he's done since then is he did give me a little work, and I told him I did the work just to help him out. And it wasn't for the money, but he used to pay me a lot better back then. And then when I helped his girlfriend the one time they had problems and I let her stay at my apartment for 4 hours, that's when he goes and gets a different little helper to help him do the crappy jobs he does. You know, like if he was doing a good job and was an actual landscaper, he would put grass seed on both sides of that laundromat and wouldn't be such a, you know, needing validation from so many people because he had two supportive parents. There's no reason for the way he treats people and the way he treats his girlfriend, whom he's said he's going to marry for the past 2 years or so. To me, he's a genuine MPD or narcissistic personality disorder. Now, about this money that I owe Shiloh Creek, there's no way I'm not going to pay for the problem I brought to Lisa's attention in the first 2 months that I stayed there. It's in the emails I brought to her attention. Checklist adherence. And many of those things that they're trying to charge me for, which are $150 for paint, which is just like a touch up, which would cost $10. The tub lining coming up, which was because Jordan didn't fix the tub faucet beforehand, checklist adherence. None of the backs of the refrigerators are vacuumed out or cleaned whatsoever, so that shortens the lifespan of all those appliances. I mean, there's just a myriad of things that he does not do or he does a shoddy job doing because, it's just, and his use of sarcasm at work. That's apparent in the entire text thread that I posted on my blog. And it's also apparent how helpful I am. If you read all the text or even some of it, and the fact that he says less is more, what is that telling me? That means Daniel, do less work because if you do more, then you're going to make me look bad and look like I'm not doing my job, which I actually, I guess doing a too good of a job is against corporate policy or something like that. And that's what, Lisa basically backs up. She only hears one side of anything. She don't listen to anybody else's opinion other than, his and hers, and that's it. How can she have a full perspective of anything? Now, my sister, she's always hated me for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it's just because I'm smarter or, it's nothing I've ever rubbed in her face, but she has always hated me and she's always played the victim my entire life, even when we were younger. And what happened 5 years ago on a vacation? See, even my daughter has this mixed up. It was very simple. It was the day that we were about to leave, and my sister was about to say to my daughter that you're lazy just like your father. And I got out of bed, got in her face with my hands down to my side, and just, I was angry, but I didn't touch her at all. What she did was she yelled for her husband, and he comes in the room with his hands stretched out, trying to choke me for at least a good 5 to 10 minutes. That's all that happened. And then after I wrestled with, my brother-in-law, who outweighs me by at least 100, 150 pounds at the time, and my dad, they had a hard time wrestling me out of that condo. And I was choking most of that night. I slept out on the porch because I didn't want to go back inside that place. And on that occasion, who got their hands put on them? Me. Kevin tried to choke me. My sister didn't even get touched. I had no intention of even, nothing was going to happen to her. I was just trying to curb her bad attitude. And I can even remember the day before that, we had took all the kids to the arcade. And the day before that, I listened to her gripe and moan about her husband. And I even remember she said she was on her period that particular vacation and she was worried about sharks and all that. I wonder if she can remember all that. I doubt it. All these things that have happened to me, between me and my family could have been easily worked out. But I guess my sister feels threatened by the fact that I'm smarter than her, I can remember better than her, and, I'm not, so susceptible to misinformation like her no ionized salt thing. That came straight from Alex Jones. I mean, it's literally, she found salt that didn't have iodine in it. And had she convinced Granny or Amy, either one of them, to do what she did and basically cut out all the iodine and try to supplement it yourself, which is a bad idea, then it could have messed up their thyroids even worse. But she screwed up her own thyroid, you know, and she loved the QAnon crap, which I don't care. She can believe what they want to believe, or they can all believe what they want to believe. But the fact is, it was all a bunch of misinformation, and her homeopathic crap. She doesn't research anything. If she had researched what the long-term effects of the Suboxone, the opiates she's been on for so many years, you know, tooth loss is one of those things that she's going to have to deal with pretty soon. And I got off Suboxone like 10 years ago. I was only on it for a year and a half, and then I was good, and I'm still good to this day. But yeah, if you count up, $100 times 1,200 a year for 10 to 15 years, that's about what, 1,200 or $12,000. That's a good chunk of money. That's not to mention the testosterone treatments that cost $600 each that she's had done. I mean, all and she's the covert narcissist in the family, the one who plays the victim, who plays both sides, and it's just she's even turned my aunt's kids against her. She somehow convinced my daughter that something other than what I just said happened on that vacation, which is not true. And it's just pathetic how, you know, so many hypocrites and over within my family, who just don't care about anybody but themselves. And if they tell you any different, they're lying. It's sad. My dad was only interested in sports, when I was growing up. He used to gamble on the horses. Mom's drank for 40 some odd years. I mean, they are nowhere perfect. They don't even try. They're on their own little apocalypse now thing, and they have been for the past 5 or 6 years. They believe the world is coming to an end every single year. That's why I can't get my mother to simply keep her promise and pay, the small school loan of $7,000. When I show her the original loan and I explain every bit of it. It starts out at 39,000, but without room and board, without this and without that, but it came out to $7,000. But right now there's $3,000 worth of interest on it too, probably more by now. And she said she paid it off in 2022. And the excuse she gives me is not now, or it's just ridiculous. Not a single one of them has ever stood up for me at all, not even once. That's the problem. That's why I don't have the self-confidence, the self-esteem to stand up for myself. My sister can't even stand up for herself. She has to be validated by mom all the time. That's you know usually when parents raise their children right, they move away and they have happy, successful lives. But none of Granny's children moved away. They're all right beside her because she is narcissistic. She is the actual problem. It wasn't Granddaddy Bob's anger or his physical abuse. It is her grandiose narcissism that is the problem, that is still causing my youngest aunt problems to this very day. And if you can prove otherwise on any of this, then I implore you to do so. My family, by all means, prove it. But if you can't prove it, then you're going to have to take my word for it, because my memory's pretty dang good. I remember my mom saying I had a fever as a child. I was in gifted and talented. I can remember 36 teachers, out of however many I had throughout the years. I graduated with a 3.6 and with honors. But, you know, my mom only went so far as to have my thyroid checked, when I was 16 or 17, as far as trying to figure out why I was so angry at 16. Now, past that, my sister was near a divorce when my nephew was, a couple of years old, and she had mono. She's had some problem with a root canal, and my mother was there for her for every one of those things. But the one time I need her, she keeps on saying, well, oh, it was this or that, when she wasn't there to witness any of it at any point. And she can't remember what she said probably 2 weeks ago, let alone, like a couple of years ago. But I can't, because it was traumatic. And and then, of course, there's Taylor. It's why you can't have a simple conversation face to face over two questions, and you have to harass me using text me now numbers, because I know you did. And somehow, and even my dad physically harassed me twice, and he got away with it too. So I guess as long as you've got social status or you're a woman in Dover, then that's who the police protects. You know, it's just, we're so corrupt, and there's so many hypocrites in Dover. It's ridiculous. Nobody stands up for anybody. Nobody knows how to communicate or have community engagement or do the right thing. But I've done the right thing, been honest, you know, at least the last portion of my life. It's as a teenager, there's nothing that, substantial that happened that's worth even mentioning. But I'm sure even my parents could tell whenever I was lying to them then, because I'm not good at lying, and I never will be good at lying, but I am good at telling the truth. And what my opinion is an educated opinion, very educated, because I've been researching all these psychology topics, and I've pretty much got it all figured out now that I'm away from my family and can see it from a distance. But it's just honestly sad that my family doesn't show the one person who goes out of their way to help others every day more support. They're just worried about material things, money, the root of all evil. And it's like, how many times Has my dad or my grandma read the Bible, and yet they still do not understand the basic concept of the Bible? Do good works, be more Christ-like, do this, do that, which the 10 guiding principles in the Bible, like the 10 Testaments, are the same among every religion. Yet there are 49,000 different denominations of the Church of Christ all throughout the world, 200 here in the USA alone. So, what does that tell you about one specific religion? That there's so much division and so many people think that they're right and that everybody else is wrong and they're judgmental, and there are good churches out there, don't get me wrong, that don't judge, and they're all different types of churches, but there are so many that are not right at all, that judge people, that, spread rumors, spread gossip. And with the other major global religions, there's only 4 to 6 denominations of those. That's it. So at least they can agree with each other mostly on faith, faith type things. It's lack of understanding, lack of wanting to understand is the main thing that all these narcissistic types are able to do. And their memory is not very good at all either. And there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that's, just being passed down from generation to generation, even in my family and in a couple other families that I know. It's sad that it's not, you know, more that help isn't more readily available, for people who have actually survived that. Because talking to a few of those people, it makes me feel, like my struggle isn't so bad because they've went through a lot more than I have, so much more, and yet somehow they made it. So I'd love hearing those stories, and I can actually listen to people and comprehend and understand. That's the difference. I've yet to find a good, like, or anyone that can listen as well as I can. But people with ADHD, they aren't, they're just wired differently. But the lack of, basically doctors who will diagnose, or, in the Netherlands, there's 5 to 10 times the rate that we have here in Arkansas. And Arkansas has the highest rate of diagnosis in children in the U.S. Think about that. We've only got like a million, or a little over a million people, and we have the highest rate of diagnosed ADHD among children. And Netherlands has 5 to 10 times that rate, and they use doctors, teachers, and uh, parents to come to a diagnosis with them. They can also communicate with each other. They don't, sit on their devices all the time. They talk with each other face to face. They have healthy debates. They work with each other. That's the difference. That the communication, the community engagement, the, transparency and the honesty is what's lacking in society today, in general.